In the summer of 1940, the world held its breath. France, a titan of Europe, had fallen to Nazi Germany in a matter of weeks. As the swastika flag was raised over Paris, a shadow loomed not just over the continent, but over the very survival of Great Britain. Standing alone, Winston Churchill, the newly appointed Prime Minister, faced a crisis that would define his legacy in the course of the war. Just weeks after France's surrender, Churchill made one of the most ruthless and shocking decisions of the entire conflict. He gave the order for the Royal Navy to attack its own ally. British guns, which should have been aimed at the Germans, would soon turn their fire upon the French. This was Operation Catapult, a brutal act of political necessity that would stain the seas with the blood of friends. When France capitulated, its powerful navy, one of the most formidable in the world, was ordered to anchor at the port of Mers el-Kebir in French Algeria, North Africa. The fleet was a prize of immense strategic value. In Churchill's mind, a terrifying possibility emerged. What if Hitler broke the terms of the armistice and seized those massive French warships? If the German Kriegsmarine absorbed the French fleet, their combined naval power could overwhelm the Royal Navy, severing Britain's vital supply lines and paving the way for a full-scale invasion. Churchill was trapped in an impossible dilemma. Should he trust the honor of the Vichy French government, which promised the fleet would never fall into German hands? Or should he take preemptive action, a brutal step to eliminate the threat once and for all? He chose the latter. The risk of inaction was simply too great. Britain's very existence was on the line. On the morning of July 3, 1940, a powerful British squadron, Force H, under the command of Admiral James Somerville, arrived off the coast of Mers el-Kebir. Somerville carried a deadly ultimatum for the French commander, Admiral Marcel Gensoul. The message was stark and uncompromising. The French had four options: join the British and continue the fight against Germany, sail their ships with reduced crews to a British port, sail to a neutral port like in the West Indies to be demilitarized, or, as a final dreadful alternative, scuttle their own fleet within 6 hours. If none of these were accepted, the Royal Navy would use whatever force was necessary to prevent the ships from falling into enemy hands. Admiral Gensoul was a proud man, bound by his duty to his government. He felt the British ultimatum was a profound insult to French honor. He believed steadfastly that France had surrendered honorably and would never allow its ships to be used by Hitler against its former ally. He refused to comply, seeing it as a betrayal of his orders from the new Vichy regime. He relayed the British demands to his superiors, but the clock was ticking relentlessly. In London, the War Cabinet grew impatient. Every minute of delay increased the risk of German or Italian naval intervention. Churchill, pacing in his underground war room, demanded a resolution. The messages flying back and forth were fraught with tension, but yielded no compromise. As the sun began to set over the Mediterranean, the deadline passed. There was no surrender, no agreement. At 5:54 p.m., with a heavy heart, Admiral Somerville gave the order. The mighty 15-inch guns of the British warships roared to life. The tranquil harbor of Mers el-Kebir erupted into a chaotic inferno of fire, steel, and smoke. The French fleet, anchored closely together and unprepared for battle, was a sitting duck. The devastation was swift and horrifying. In just 10 minutes of concentrated bombardment, the French battleship Bretagne was hit in a magazine and exploded in a catastrophic fireball, taking nearly 1,000 of her crew with her. The battleship Provence was set ablaze and ran aground. The Dunkirk was heavily damaged. It was a nightmare scenario realized. Allies turned enemies, slaughtering each other in a harbor that should have been a haven. When the smoke finally cleared, the grim toll became apparent. Over 1,297 French sailors were dead. The world reacted with shock and outrage. The Vichy French government severed diplomatic ties with Britain, and anti-British sentiment soared in France. For many, it was an unforgivable act of treachery. Yet, for Churchill, it was a grim but necessary signal. He later told the House of Commons with a tear in his eye that it was the most hateful decision he ever had to make. but he had to prove to the world, and especially to the United States, that Britain was utterly determined to fight on, alone if necessary, and would never surrender. Operation Catapult remains one of the darkest and most controversial episodes of World War II, a brutal calculation made in a moment of extreme peril. It demonstrated Churchill's iron will and his readiness to make unspeakable choices for what he saw as the greater good. It was a tragic, bloody affair, but it sent a clear, chilling message to both friend and foe. Britain would stop at nothing to survive and win the war. It was a brutal act that, perhaps, bought the free world just enough time to fight back. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this piece of history as fascinating as we did, please hit that like button. And consider subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the defining moments of the past. We'll see you in the next one.